ಬಂದಿದೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಹಿರಿಯರೇ ಇತರ ರಾಜ ರಾಣಿ, ಹತ್ತೋಣ ನಾವು ಅವರ ನೆನಪಿನ ದೋಣಿ, ಕೇಳುತ್ತಾ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ. ಇದು ಹಿರಿಯರ ಕತೆ ಹಿರಿಯರ ಜೊತೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇರಿ, ಖುಷಿಯಾಗಿರಿ. Hello listeners, this is your RJ Chandana and I welcome you all to Anubhav, a joint project of National Institute of Social Defense, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India and Media for Community Foundation, implemented by Nightingales Medical Trust. Project conceived by Dr. R. Sridhar, Project Investigator Alok Verma, Coordinators Pooja Murada, Sai Sudha and Kaushalya. Government of India has initiated an Elderline toll-free number 14567. Elders or anyone on behalf of elders can call between morning 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for any questions, queries and support to elderly.
Yeah, a big welcome and good morning to all of you. Of course, we're all ready and eager to listen to the scintillating raconteur and effervescent communicator Roopa Pai. She has some explosive ideas and little known facts after deep research into the labyrinth of the medical field, its origins, journey, and usage. Her inimitable and punchy expressions are awesome, to put it mildly. When she speaks, rest assured that you will be bowled over by her knowledge and smooth articulation. Her book, Gita for Children, is a must for every adult, leave alone children. The characters are brought alive and kicking into our lives. She will leave us asking for more and more. Roopa Pai is one of India's best known writers for children. The Bangalore-based author has written over 25 books, ranging from picture books to chapter books, fiction to non-fiction, on themes as varied as sci-fi fantasy, popular science, math, history, economics, Indian philosophy, life skills, and most recently, medicine. Many of her books are bestsellers and enjoyed by one and all. Her most popular books include the 8-part Terranauts, India's first fantasy adventure series for children in English, Ready 99 must-have skills for the world-conquering teenager and almost teenager, the award-winning national bestseller, The Gita for Children, listed by Amazon India as one of 100 books to be read in a lifetime, and its prequel, The Vedas and Upanishads for Children. Her TED Talk, Decoding the Gita, India's Book of Answers, has received over 1.8 million reviews to date. Her most recent book for children is Leeches to Slug Glue, 25 explosive ideas that made and are making modern medicine. Now, this is the book. I have it with me here. It's a wonderful book. You must, all of you, get it and read it. She has received rave reviews from our very own Dr. Devi Shetty for this piece of work. She has co-authored Fitness Evangelist and Supermodel Milind Soman's memoir, Made in India, and is currently working on a book of poetry in translation, in which she is translating 100 poems of the much acclaimed Kannada poet, Padma Shri K.S. Nisar Ahmad in English. When she's not writing, Roopa can be found leading groups of children and young people on history and heritage walks across her beloved Karnataka. As part of her job as a director of a company, she co-founded with her husband Arun Pai, Bangalore Walks. As Roopa herself claims, she is a writer who has carried on a long-time love affair with her hometown Bangalore. Now, this is just about a brief introduction to this ever-talented and effervescent Roopa Pai. Over to you now, Roopa. It's all yours now.
Thank you. Namaste, Ushanti. That was like so wonderful, the introduction, that I fear that I will not be able to live up to this image you have built up, that I'm so effervescent and intelligent. And okay, anyway, I shall try my best. Also, it was me that suggested to Ushanti that maybe my book on medicine, I could talk about this subject, because Okay, I must go back in time a little to tell you the story. So the book actually was published in September 2019. Just before that, I wasn't sure what I had written. Several other books, the Vedas and Upanishads for children had come out, and I was looking for something a little out of the philosophy thing, some kind of a different book I wanted to write. And that's when Penguin approached me and they said, do a book for us. And I said, what subject? And they said, pick your subject, whatever you want. And although I have written a lot of fiction for children, in the recent years, I have moved sort of to nonfiction because I realized that there is a lack of good non-fiction books for children that is Indian, that uses an Indian context. Most of the good non-fiction books for children are American or from somewhere else. Now we have a huge burgeoning collection written by Indian authors for Indian children about Indian heroes, sportsmen, scientists, all that. It's happening right now. But for a long time, when I started writing non-fiction, almost about 10 years ago, there wasn't very much. And once I started writing nonfiction, I enjoyed the process so much because I think what I really enjoy and what I'm good at is research into, perhaps just because I'm curious and I find every subject interesting. So I like to do a lot of research, which a lot of other people may not like to do or may not be very good at in the sense of taking some large amounts of data that you have to go through during research and converting it into something simple that even children can understand and appreciate, So that seems to be my kind of true skill. So I began to do a lot of that. Now, when Penguin said you can pick your subject, I thought about it a little and I said, I don't know for what reason. I said, why not medicine? And the editor's jaw sort of hit the ground and she's like, what? A history of medicine for children? Why would they be interested? Can you not think of something a little more happy or a little more interesting? She actually thought it would be boring. Why would you want to know? I mean, especially like, you can write well for children, you can write in a conversational tone. So let that dry kind of books be left to somebody else. And why don't you write something else? But I knew, because of my own interest in medicine, that there were wonderful stories to be told and retold in the history of medicine. And why did I know all this and why was I so interested in medicine? Because my own elder sister is a doctor. And I was at a very impressionable, age? I might have been 14 or something when she started her course in BMC in Bangalore, her MBBS. And what fascinated, because I've always been a book lover, what fascinated me most about medicine, apart from the fact that she was so passionate about it herself, were the books. They were like these giant fat books, and they were so beautifully produced. That time when I was 14, you couldn't get beautifully produced books in India. They were always foreign books, and these were very expensive books. But I got to get them for free because my sister had to study them. And one I remember in particular is Grey's Anatomy. I'm sure there are some doctors among you who are listening. Either you are doctors yourselves or married to doctors or have children who are doctors, so you're all probably familiar with this. Grey's Anatomy, a really fat book, hardcover. And my sister, for some reason, enjoyed this whole process of dissection and taking people apart and looking at the stuff inside. And I was like, no. I have very academic interest in medicine. So this book is wonderful because it had these color plates that opened up, that folded 3 times, and then you would open it up and you would see the whole anatomy. And she would want to teach me about it. She wanted to explain. So, using that, I'm like, yes, this much distance is enough. I don't want to actually be near a cadaver. This is good. I like to look at pictures of it and learn about it. So, and that Grey's Anatomy was the kind of book that if you were the sort who read in bed, please, it would be recommended not to, because if it fell on your face, you would probably die. So it was that thick. And the words were tiny, but it was a fascinating. And when she was in 4th year, the other book I found absolutely fascinating was they had to study forensic medicine. And being a big fan of Perry Mason books and all the courtroom drama, crime, investigations of forensic medicine, where the ballistics department, where did the bullet come from? Where did it enter? Entry hole? Where did it exit from? And all this was actually a science, and it was in a book. So this was very interesting to me. So anyway, the thing that explains my interest in medicine. But why I chose to write a book on medicine for children was something a little deeper than that. I had seen my sister when she turned out she decided to specialize in gynecology, OBG, so she's a gynecologist. And I remember when she first graduated, or even when she was an intern, and she would deliver babies, and her patients would treat her like a goddess. They would say, you gave us our baby, and she would always be coming home laden with sweets and biryani and saris, and that grateful patients would give her. And I was like, okay, this is wonderful. You do the hard work, we get to eat the sweets. This is very nice. I like this arrangement. But over the course of just a brief 20-25 years, I saw that whole arc change. It turned 180 degrees until today. We have doctors being attacked, because a patient died, doctors being treated as money. The way we talk about doctors in our own families are not as healers or life givers, or we talk about, or even experts in a particular science. We talk about them. I mean, I heard around me a lot of talk about they are just cutthroat, they are just money making people, they practice in so many things, and they'll send you for all kinds of tests that you don't need. And basically the bottom line is that the corporate hospital has to make money. So the whole science of healing and medicine, which was so revered, as it should be, had undergone this complete change in a brief period of 25 years. I saw that my sister was working just as hard as she ever did, that she cared about her profession and every baby she delivered and every mother as much as she ever did. But she was under pressure. Her back was to the wall now. She was so afraid always of, what will happen, and the relatives all militantly waiting outside, so it had changed a lot. And I thought to myself, and also this huge return to Western medicine is all rubbish. They put toxic stuff in your body, and it is Indian medicine or some alternative traditional of any country, which is the best thing. So people began to talk like that. And I was like, because I knew of the history a little bit, unfortunately, even medical students don't study the history of medicine, which is a great pity. They don't have a subject called the history of medicine, because I think young students coming in to study medicine, these are great inspirational stories for them to keep in mind, to know that this is how their profession has come to where they are, and they have to carry the baton or the torch forward. I think it will be very inspiring if they read the history of medicine, but they don't have it as a subject. So I felt it was sort of my responsibility even that I should make the healer center stage again in the minds of children, because children are only hearing the negative stuff about doctors and medicine and hospitals, which may be partly true, of course, but what is getting lost is we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're not celebrating the hardworking doctor who is actually so dedicated to his or her profession. So that's why I decided to write this book on medicine. And it was a fascinating journey for me also. I knew a little bit. I knew there were fascinating stories, but to find out just how fascinating and how much of the globe they spanned and how long this whole thing has gone on, that was a revelation, and it was quite amazing for me also. So let's start with so it feels, the way people talk about, and then what happened was September 2019, I wrote this book. And the way I wrote this book was, oh my God, we have, humanity has overcome every disease and we are at the top of things. And this, this has been conquered, that has been conquered. And then 6 months later, only 6 months later, we slide into this devastating global pandemic that no one knows what to do about. So that brings, that was like a sort of sobering moment for me. And I said, oh my God, the way I wrote this book, if I had to write it now, how differently I would write it. However, because I had done the research and written this book, what it also gave me through the pandemic was a feeling of we shall overcome. Because what I understood when I wrote this book was that humanity has gone through so many hardships, so many pandemics in the past, and we have always come through. We have always come through. Somebody somewhere figures out a way to solve a problem, to defeat a disease, and then we get over it. So it also gave me hope that, humans, the human spirit, innovation, enterprise, hope, all this will triumph in the end and we will come out okay. And which happened with the quickest development of a vaccine any time in human history for coronavirus. It was the quickest. We have never been able to develop a vaccine at this speed. And once again, it proved that the human spirit conquers all, will triumph in the end. So anyway, so that was the very long introduction to this whole thing. But I think it was important to give you context about what this book is about. And so if you look at, so what is Western medicine or modern medicine as it is called? It's a very, very, one of the newest sciences. It's not more than 150, 160 years old, depends on what event you use to start marking it as the beginning of modern medicine. But it's a very, very new science. It's startling to think that even 150, 180 years ago, I mean, at least until 150 years ago, no one in the world knew what caused disease. It was still sort of, maybe just I mean, there were all kinds of theories, including bad air. It's bad air that causes disease. So you don't go somewhere near rotting food. Don't go near swamps, because that smell and that air that rises from there, that is what causes disease. And in fact, if here's a little quiz question for all of you, you can put in the chat box or unmute yourselves and say, there is a disease that is named after bad air. Its name itself indicates bad air. What is that disease? In Latin, it means bad air. Anyone? Okay, I will tell you. Malaria, mal-area, bad air, because that was what people thought caused disease until this French biochemist called Louis Pasteur came along in 1880. That's not even 150 years ago, and proved that it was germs that caused disease. Nobody had seen the connection between germs and disease. I mean, it is that recent. It actually blows your mind to think this is all so new. However, it wasn't as if everything was gloom. Also, like, 150, 180 years ago, the life expectancy for an average human being was 40 years, 45 years. And now it's 80, even in India. Of course, also, let us note this, that women have longer life expectancy than women anywhere in the world. So women walk with pride. Your bodies have made you the superior of the species. But also, what was I saying? Yeah. So now, even in India, where there is so much malnutrition and everything, average life expectancy is at 65 or something, which is huge. So there is much celebration all around that modern science, modern medicine has made all this, if you think, same thing. 150 years ago, nobody knew that germs cause disease. 180 years ago, people would use leeches as a form of therapy. I mean, this has been going on for centuries and centuries. Leeches. Why would, if somebody was ill, you would just put a lot of leeches on that person to suck out bad blood, because that was thought to be the cause of disease. Okay, and I'll tell you something about leeches a little later, but leeches are back. They're being upheld as a great therapy, as great treatment for certain things. And now, like, very hygienically, they're being bred in the US and Japan. They have particular uses in medicine and surgery even today. So it wasn't all mumbo jumbo, the leeches thing. There was some element of science to it. So, and if you had to, even in the American Civil War, where Abraham Lincoln presided over the American Civil War, where the North fought against the South, wanting to remove slavery, even there, when a soldier was injured in war and his leg needed to be amputated, they would do it without anesthesia, because anesthesia had not been invented yet, or wasn't as widespread yet to be used on war. So I tell children, how easily we throw out modern medicine and say, like, oh, it's all toxic and what we need is actually just Ayurveda and stuff like that. Ayurveda is great. Ayurveda is great to maintain a healthy body. But when something goes wrong with your body, there is nothing as good as modern medicine that can come in and help you recover. So I say, can you imagine if you lived before modern medicine, what kind of life you would have had? that if you needed an amputation or a surgery, it would have to be done in the absence of an anesthetic. That if you were even slightly, leeches would be thrown on top. For some reason, that gets children more horrified than the pain. Like leeches on top of you, that is sort of more mind-numbing than any other kind of thing. And people would not know that germs, there were no medicines, there were no cures, there were just like stuff that you would do to sort of maintain it. And if you go a little further back, just another 100 years or 200 years back, in a lot of cultures across the world, disease was thought to be the result of a curse by a demon or a god. And therefore, if you had, and that's why they would do all these rituals and pujas and all to remove the curse, to cure disease, call the shamans, call the witch doctors, they will do a dance, they will do some sorcery, they will speak to the spirits and get the curse lifted. Or so this was the kind of thinking there was. And this is for physical disease. If you had a mental illness, today's youngsters embrace mental illness. Everybody wants to be mentally ill. They have these, anything, the excuses, no, but I'm not feeling well, and I'm something is wrong with me, I'm depressed. And I mean, it's widespread right now, including at the Olympics, when the star American gymnast Simone Biles, she walked out because she said, I can't do it because my mental health is not okay. But I tell children, if you lived 180 years ago, you know how mental health used to be treated? People didn't know what to do with people acting weird or abnormal. So what they would do is drill holes in your skull to let the evil spirit out, because mental illness was thought of as demonic possession. And so they would either do that, or they would give you electric shocks to keep you quiet, or they'd put you in a padded. I mean, that happened until very recently also. Probably continues to happen in many parts of the world. Padded cells, and tie them up, and most heartbreakingly, they would be put up on show as the mad people, and people would be charged a fee to come in and look at them and mock them like people in a zoo, like animals in a zoo. So there was no compassion involved where mental illness was there, because it wasn't understood. And none of these doctors or there were no psychologists, but all these people who were treating these people or taking caretakers, they were not being malicious or mean. They really thought the devil had possessed that person. And therefore, one way to treat it or to make it go away was to abuse the body of that person. So, so I tell children that this is what it was. So if you're saying that modern medicine is all rubbish, you might want to do a rethink, because we live in this 21st century where life, you're definitely going to live longer than your predecessors did. You're definitely going to have a more disease-free life, because we know what causes disease and therefore we know how to prevent it. And you're definitely going to live a more pain-free life, because we have medicines that can manage pain. None of this was there even as 200 years ago. And then how did they used to then amputate or anything? They would give that guy a good shot of alcohol or something like that, or some narcotic, so that he would sort of fade away from consciousness a little bit. And the trouble was, if you gave too much of whatever narcotic, that person may die from that, not from the amputation. Which is why most people, when they said surgery, would flee for their lives, because they say, I'd rather live in, and than to go through this pain. So that was the situation. But I wanted to also show you my screen. I wanted to share my screen and show you something. But let's start with a question. Who is the Indian god of medicine? God. Unmute and tell me.
Ashwini Kumar?
Yeah, the Ashwini Kumars, the twins. One of them is a god of healing and one is the god of medicine. And they are also supposed to be the children of the sun and the clouds. That's right. That is one school of thought considers the Ashwini Kumars the gods of medicine. Who is the, Madhavi is put it in the chat box. Who is the god of Ayurveda? In the chat box, Dhanvantari. That's right. So who is Dhanvantari? And also in the Vedic times, anybody knows who was the god of medicine? Vedic, long back, like 3,500 years ago. before Dhanvantri and before Ashwini Kumars. Ashwinis were there even then in the Vedic times, but there was one god who was called Vaidyanatha. And he was supposed to have this arsenal of pills and potions. You can tell me his modern name also if you want. If you don't know his Vedic name. He continues to be Sushruta. No. Sushruta was a real person, not a god.
Oh.
Agastya Charvaka. No, Charaka. Charvaka is a kind of philosophy of Surya Narayan. Not quite. So actually Rudra, who we now know as Shiva, used to be also called Vaidyanatha. He was the healer. Anyway, so I also find it interesting to put these little nuggets into children's books about medicine, because I want them to know that, okay, so if modern medicine has done all so much for us and made our lives so much better, how did people even survive in times before, right? So the thing is that certain societies were far, far ahead of everybody else. It's not that there was no medicine at all. There were very complex schools of medicine even before, and they sort of fell out of use, went away from the mainstream, and all the original proponents of these died, or somehow that science itself fell into disuse, and we have lost it, and now we are trying to revive it. So it's not as if there was never any science, that humanity has only been suffering all these years. That's also not true. But in the last 150 years, we have seen a great resurgence of good science, and medicine and health has improved like anything. So I wanted to show you a picture of Dhanvantri from my screen. Can you see it? Can you see my screen now? It's blank right now. You can see a blank screen? Yeah, okay. So this is Dhanvantri. He's supposed to have come up during the turning of the ocean. He's the last one to arrive. First, there was all hala hala and all the other things, parijata, all those wonderful things came up. And finally, Dhanvantri comes up, and what he's holding in his left upper arm, or lower arm, I'm not sure, is the pot of Amrit, which came up from the churning of the ocean. But what Dhanvantri is also holding is, as you can see in his left hand, herbs or plants. Because what Ayurveda is an amazing knowledge of every plant and tree and fruit and leaf and bark and what it can be used for, along with a great knowledge of metals and minerals that you can add to medicine to make it potent or not. Yeah, so this is Dhanvantri, right? This is one way of depicting Dhanvantri, and he looks like Vishnu because he's considered to be one of the 24 avatars of Vishnu. We know only of Dashavatar mostly. That has become the popular thing, but actually there were 24 avatars, and he is supposed to be one of them. I want you to look at another representation of Dhanvantri, which you will find a lot in Ayurvedic massage parlors. They also obviously celebrate Dhanvantri. So I want you to look at this, and if you notice something unusual, let me know. Anyone? Actually, I can't see the chat, I think. No, can I? No, I can. Okay. Has anybody put anything? Just unmute and say, otherwise I will give you an, yeah.
Oh, it is the face of a lady.
Oh,
That's what I want to tell you, yeah. Face
okay,
is like lady, body is like a male body.
Okay.
Male body and female face.
I didn't actually notice that, but yeah, I think a lot of Vishnu's avatars are shown like that. I mean, Krishna is also supposed to be, and in Karnataka we have in the Belur temple is Chenna Keshava, which is like a beautiful Keshava. He's so many times Vishnu is not described as handsome but beautiful. So that androgyny is very much present in Vishnu, also in Shiva, of course, when he's Ardhanarishwara. So that is just that. I want you to look at, so there are the Vishnu things that he's holding, the Shankha and the Chakra, and he's holding Amrit, the pot of Amrit, and what is he holding in his other hand?
A potli.
A what? A potli.
Potli.
No,
Yeah.
it's not a potli. Surprise, surprise. It is a jalauka, which means a leech.
Oh, okay.
So Dhanvantri also holds a leech in his hand. So leeches are very much part of Ayurveda as well, leech treatment. Yeah, so even though we like to think that science is something very new that has come to us now, everything before was also very scientific only. Right, now let me look at what else I have here. Okay. So are you, yeah. So the other thing now, somebody's mentioned Sushruta. So I was saying that some cultures, even 2000 years ago, were far ahead of the field. Not just like as if not in a, if there were like these inter-civilizational medical Olympics, 3 countries, 3 civilizations would have come out on top in those times, 2000 years ago. Which ones?
India.
India?
China, maybe. China.
Not Germany. There was no Germany at all.
China.
I mean, there was China, yes.
China.
Egypt.
No, Egypt was not so ahead. You like, no. Greece, India, and
Romans,
China.
I think.
Huh?
Roman?
Not yet. Greeks were, everything in Western civilization comes from the Greeks. Actually, all Greek thought has influenced everything. So it was
Tibet.
Tibet, I don't know. I think that would have been considered part of India only. Part of this whole landmass. So India, China, and Greece. And
Cambodia.
I don't know. They're too small. I mean, Cambodian civilization, isn't it more like Indians have gone there and spread our civilization? All the Hinduism and the Angkor Wat and all comes from here. I don't know ethnically if they had such an ancient civilization themselves, or if they achieved any, like, or the thing is with ancient things, we can never say for sure. Maybe we just haven't found what they achieved. Maybe we haven't interpreted it. Like even our Indus Valley civilization, the seals, we haven't interpreted the script yet. And
some South American country.
We don't know. Maybe, but the known world 2000 years ago was Europe, Africa, Asia. Because
Inca civilization, say, madam, Inca civilization is, they say that is one of the oldest civilization, Inca, INCA.
I know, but we didn't know. We don't know anything about them until Columbus went to America and discovered those 2 landmasses. I don't think they are more ancient than 2000 years. Definitely not. They are. They might be ancient, but not as ancient as. They are not counted among the most ancient civilizations in the world. Egypt, yes. Mesopotamia, India, all these riverbank-based civilizations. India was because Indus Valley civilization, not the Vedic civilization. So we have come to the Vedic civilization now, 2000 years ago, not 4000 or 5000 years ago. So our Indus Valley was that long ago. Maybe if we interpret the Indus Valley seals or find more artifacts, maybe they were even more advanced. We don't know. They were definitely more advanced in city building, urban craft, urban development. They were way ahead. They had toilets that flushed. They had sewers and like much better urban planning than we do in India today. And they had it 4,500 years ago. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But so Greece, China, and India were far ahead. And of course, you all know, you mentioned it in the chats already, the 2 great medical men of India, the great rishis, 2 great ones that we know. There must have been so many more, but only 2, their names have survived because they left works. They left behind books or compendiums of knowledge. You know who they were, right? Sushruta and Charaka. Exactly. And Sushruta was India's first, or at least as far as we know, India's first surgeon, and Charaka was physician. So it's also said that there were many Charakas. Charaka was a titular thing. Charaka meant physician, and it was all of them with their combined knowledge that put together the Charaka Samhita, could be. And there is a Sushruta Samhita as well, which is a compendium of what Sushruta discovered about surgery, or used to practice as a surgeon, and which were the 2 areas in which he was way ahead of the rest of the world. in surgery? I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of my tea if you don't mind. In which areas? Anyone? Ushanti, you're saying something, but you're muted. I can't hear you.
Plastic surgery.
Yes, plastic surgery and bones. No, bone setting. No, I mean he must have been a good bone setter, but ahead of the world.
Abdomen incisions.
No.
Heart.
Sorry.
Heart.
No. Transplant. No, not transplant. Eyes. The eyes. Yes. So plastic surgery, of course, it wasn't called plastic surgery, reconstructive surgery. That's right. Dr. M. Vasanta. So she knows what she's talking about. So yeah, reconstructive surgery. And which two body parts did he use to reconstruct a lot? Which had he figured out how to reconstruct?
Knee,
no.
Nose, by
nose and
Fingers. Skin.
No, nose and skin would have come from different parts for the reconstruction. Nose and
Back.
Think about what else sticks out and has a possibility of being injured.
mouth,
Nose and ears.
ears.
Yes, nose and ears. So this was rhinoplasty, what we would call rhinoplasty today, and this is otoplasty, OTO. So otoplasty. And why do you think 2000 years ago, expert genius surgeon decided to figure out these two things, how to reconstruct ears and noses? I mean, there were no film actresses wanting to reconstruct their noses so that they could have better noses. I mean, human vanity would have been there even then, so some people might have wanted it. But why would a genius surgeon to elevate humanity, because also a rishi, like he was a deeply pious, meditative, kind of devout person, why would he choose the nose and ears to reconstruct?
Smell and hearing.
I suppose during wars, those would be chopped off easily.
Yes, that's right. So those were the things that came under the sword a lot, nose and ears. And not only during wars, it was also a punishment for criminals, right? Or for prisoners of war. It was supposed, I mean, what can be, today we have acid attacks on young girls because they want to disfigure the face. That time, what was institutionalized was again disfiguring the face, because what could be worse than that for someone who has to live with that? Because cutting off nose and ears don't actually damage your sense of smell or hearing. You can continue to hear. So you're not permanently damaged in any way faculty wise, but facially you are completely ruined. And what's more, every time you walk the streets for the rest of your life, you will be recognized as a criminal or as a prisoner of war who was humiliated. So it was, yeah, exactly. So Mohini says, I wanted to ask you to think about a story in which you have seen this happen. And Shurpanaka in the Ramayana, the first thing Lakshmana does is cut off her nose and ears, because that was the regular treatment meted out. Otherwise, he must have been like, why would he think of that first thing when somebody's attacking? If somebody's attacking him or his brother or his sister-in-law, he would probably go for some other part, right? Why would he cut off? Because that was the way it was done. So disfigurement was considered to be more humiliating than anything else. So that's why Sushruta developed this, so that a lot of people could then proceed to live normal lives once their noses and ears were reconstructed. The other thing, and in this particular thing, there was nobody in the world who was doing this at that time, so far as we know, was eye surgery, and in particular, cataract surgery. So I want to show you, I'm sure the doctors here know, and I'm sure many of you have probably already had cataract surgeries. So you know what a cataract surgery is about, but this is usually the PowerPoint presentation I show to children, and they don't know what it is at all. They just know that grandparents have had it. So I want to just show it again. So this is the eye, and we all know the different parts of the eye, etc. We have all studied it in biology in school. So I want to ask you, so the light enters, can you see my cursor on the screen? Yes. So the light enters through here it goes to the cornea, which is the clear layer on top of the eye, the clear film. And then the light strikes the lens in the eye. The lens bends the rays of light. It proceeds, the bent rays of light proceed through the lens, proceed through the eyeball, which is contains a gel-like substance called vitreous humor, which allows us to keep the shape of the eye round. It keeps the shape. So it proceeds through this gel, and on the retina, which is the screen at the back of the eye, the image is formed there. And so far, it's only an image. It's only when the optic nerve takes that image, that information to the brain, and the brain interprets that image as whatever we are seeing, then we see. So it's such a complicated process, this thing of seeing. That's why the ancient Vedas and everything call the eye is just matter, but sight, the faculty of sight, that is a god. There is a god for sight, because it cannot explain how all these simple diagrams turn into something where you understand that it's a tree and everything that it has. Okay, it's very difficult. So this is the eye. How is an image formed in the eye? How do I go to the next? Sorry. So this is how an image is formed in the eye. Again, physics lessons, refraction. So the candle, you're seeing only the candle flame. The rays go there. They are refracted, means they are bent by the cornea itself a little bit, bent further as they pass through the lens, and the image is formed at the back in an upside down, ulta. So even that ulta image, the optic nerve takes and the brain figures it out. So what Sushruta was a master at was cataract surgery. What happens during cataract surgery? Now that we know what the eye looks like, what happens? What is the defect that happens in an eye during cataract? Why would you need a cataract surgery? The lens becomes
Loss of vision.
Loss of vision. Why? Which part of the eye actually causes this loss of vision? It is the lens. The lens with age becomes hardened, ossified, and then it becomes translucent. Very transparent lens when you're young becomes translucent, and then slowly opaque. So basically light is blocked right here at the lens. Light is blocked here, so all this process cannot happen. So light is blocked there. So now what we do when we have to take a cataract surgery is that they remove the lens, the old hardened lens, and they put in a new one, which is made in the lab. And that suddenly everybody has 20/20 vision, perfect vision. Even if you were myopic or anything before, this gift of a new lens allows you to see clearly. But obviously in Sushruta's time, there were no lab-made lenses, and there was no provision of putting in a new lens, etc. But he used to do cataract surgery. So what did he used to do, do you think? Or does anybody know? To make people's lives a little easier, so that they wouldn't have to be so dependent on others. They wouldn't have to go completely blind. So what Sushruta, very interesting, I'll show you in the next slide. So what Sushruta used to do was this. This is the eye. And basically he used to put an instrument, a sharp instrument into the eye and push the lens out of its slot.
Fix.
Huh?
Fix.
No. Take out the hardened lens.
Sorry, can you see? Yeah. So he just pushed the lens out of its slot. When you push the lens out, what happens? So imagine the lens is not there. So instead of bending further here, it would just go straight. Okay, so you would not get such a sharp image of the object on the retina, but you would get an image, a blurred image, and you would be able to tell. You would be able to tell the difference between night and day, between colors. You would be able to tell movement. Somebody's coming towards you or not. You'd be able to see obstacles like trees or whatever on the way. And therefore, you would be able to live a somewhat decent life without too much dependence on other people, right? So that is what Sushruta did. This whole procedure was called couching, where you just moved the lens out of its place and you gave the person a fresh lease of life. The thing to wonder about, what I wondered about is cataract is a disease of old age. Sushruta 2000 years ago had to develop this kind of surgery over all others. This meant it was a vital need, which means people lived well beyond 75, You know, like all the rishis, they say 120, 130, 200 by the Vyasa. It was probably, at least they lived to a ripe old age. So when we say, you know, 150 years ago, 180 years ago, the life expectancy was 40. This has not been the case since ever. It has just gone into this because of various other things that have happened, and we have forgotten the original ways of living, living without pollution, living with peace and calm, living with a devotion to a greater being or whatever that allows us to live longer and healthier lives, or eating the right kinds of foods. Simple as that, right? So, so it's very, for me, it was very interesting to know that, to think that people must have lived for very long earlier. Otherwise, why would he have come up with cataract surgery of all things? Anyway, that is our Sushruta Charaka story. Another very interesting thing, I have only 15 minutes more, so I will try to rush through, and I haven't even crossed 2000 years ago, and this is supposed to be like over a long period. So I'll just mention a few things. One thing which I felt was very important, again, for children to know and for all of us to know as well, is somehow we think of, after your Greece, China, India, we think of Europe, the Renaissance in Europe, as being the giver of all things wise and wonderful to humanity, right? But if you think that the Renaissance in Europe started only in the 14th century, so that was only like 600 years ago. What happened in between 2000 years ago and 1400 years ago? Who was making all the developments? Who was taking it forward? And there's a huge gap there in how history is taught. Because if you take one thread, like one history of medicine, and go back and follow it, you'll realize that, so the Greeks, we'll talk about that. So the Greeks were huge. Then the Roman Empire came in, conquered Greece, became the largest empire, and conquered everybody until Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Everything settled down. They had most of Europe and Arabia under them, parts of Africa. Okay, so like, or at least Arabia for sure. So Roman Empire, Turkey and Greece and all that. Then what happened was, around 396 AD, what we used to call AD, what's called CE now. So around 395 AD, the 396 AD, the Roman Empire became so bulky that one emperor couldn't administer the whole thing. So it was divided into Western Roman Empire and Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire included Greece and Turkey and all these parts. And the Western Roman Empire included what we know today as Western Europe, right? And this continued for a while until the Roman Empire fell in some 490 AD or something. The Roman Empire fell to invading Goths and Visigoths and all that from Northern Europe. Once that happened, the Western Roman Empire fell into something that fell into 1,000 years of absolutely no development, which we call today the Dark Ages. So 1,000 years of nothing, no scholarship, no academics, no invention, no innovation, nothing. They fell in 1,000 years. Can you imagine? 1,000 years, Dark Ages, and no development happened at that time. Then who was furthering the development at that time was the Eastern Roman Empire. So unfortunately, Greece fell to the Western Roman Empire. And Greece was Eastern only, Greece was Eastern. But in the Western Roman Empire, the Greek texts that were celebrated, Greek texts had everything. So the Greeks who came before had done all the innovation in philosophy, in science, astronomy, medicine, everything they had done. But Greek wasn't very well understood in the Western Roman Empire. Also, the new overlords who came in, you know how it happens. Any old civilization that they take over from, they will destroy and say that old civilization is absolute rubbish. Everything that they held sacred, we will destroy. And that's how all that knowledge was lost to Western Europe. All the Greek knowledge was lost to Western Europe. However, in Greece itself and in Arabia, that knowledge was kept and was preserved and kept growing until Muhammad the Prophet. So Islam was founded in about 622 AD is very important year. So Islam was founded, and the Islamic Empire grew and grew, included Africa, a lot of Asia, all of Arabia, and what used to be the Eastern Roman Empire. So all that was ruled by the Islamic Empire. And the Islamic Empire, one of their main things, Muhammad the Prophet's, one of his main things was to translate the Quran, which was in Arabic, into all the other languages spoken by all the other people in the Islamic Empire so that they would understand the word of God. Now, this great translation project, once you have all the translators, then you would give them things to translate. Quran finished, next. So then all the Greek works of medicine were translated into Arabic. Just as things from Arabic were being translated to other languages, works of literature or science from other languages were being translated into Arabic. And then when the Renaissance started in Western Europe, in Italy, and if you see, Italy is like Naples, I mean, Italy, the foot of Italy is very close to Arabia. And that's how the knowledge went back to them. They said, and by this time, Islamic scholars who had all the knowledge of the Greeks, who had all the medical knowledge of the Indians, because the translation project also translated from Sanskrit into Arabic. So they had at their disposal in one of the greatest libraries of that time in Baghdad, called the Abbasid Library, the House of Wisdom. They had all these texts handwritten from every civilization till then. Whatever medical development had been made was all available to them. And standing on the shoulders of those books, they went far ahead. So this whole Islamic part of development, they were the greatest astronomers, science, architecture, all of that developed in the Islamic Empire, which lasted for 800 years. And somehow in our history books, we are never taught this. That we're not taught much about the Islamic Empire. It's such a pity because they are neighbors to us. We are taught more about Europe and America. We are not taught, our children are not taught about our own neighbors, the Islamic Empire, which use Sanskrit texts and furthered their own knowledge and furthered the knowledge of humanity. Anyway, that was one brief thing I wanted to say. Now, I think I want to tell you about anesthesia, how anesthesia was discovered finally. So that by now Renaissance had come in and Europe was at the cutting edge of everything. Everybody was discovering something in the age of innovation. Basically, what they let go of. Why did they come into the Renaissance? What was keeping them down for 1,000 years? So what was keeping them down for 1,000 years was a belief that man has no ability of his own. That man is completely subservient to some God who treats us all as his pawns, and he sits there in heaven and judges us and decides what punishments and rewards to give, and we are not capable of anything. But the Renaissance, and this thing had been solved way earlier, 3,500 years. The Vedas, you say, does God know everything? You even question the presence of or existence of an omniscient one who created everything. But Europe was way behind. So they were still thinking that until there is some God only who controls everything, we have no power at all to do anything. Until that changed, and then they went in a pendulum to the other side and left. Now they've left the church itself, like they're saying we are everything. So they've lost the wonder of believing in something magical. Anyway, so what was I saying? Yeah. So anyway, so Renaissance, all scientists, everybody saying, no, we have the power, we can explore, use your brain, you have the sense of reason, use your sense of reasoning and logic to find out. No time, I'm sorry, Alexandria, I know so much is there to talk about, but I want to bring it quickly into the last 500 years, at least one thing from the last 500 years before we end. So as part of the innovation of science and everything, and of healing, then they said maybe they had just started discovering what were the elements of the atmosphere. They were finally able to separate gases. And then, so they said, let us try and figure out if any gas, now that we have separated the gases, can any gas heal disease? Since we think it's bad air that causes disease, is there some good air that can heal it? And so a pneumatic institute was set up in London. And who was in charge of it? Who set it up? Robert Stephenson, the guy who invented the locomotive. So he set it up, and there were different airs were being tested. Inhale this air, see what happens. That kind of crazy testing, where people would test it on themselves. And one of the volunteers or workers there in that pneumatic institute, one of the people who worked there, was a very young Humphrey Davy. You might have heard his name. He's also a scientist who discovered many things, Humphrey Davy. And he was very young, and he was like, come on, let us. let me try all these gases. So every time he would take some new gas had been separated, he would take it to his nose and inhale it and see on himself what the effects were, which, as we can all imagine, was pretty dangerous. So once he inhaled carbon monoxide, almost died. Once he inhaled nitrous oxide and burnt all his insides of his, because it combined with the mucus lining, the moisture in the mucus lining became nitric acid and nearly burnt his insides. But he was when he inhaled the carbon monoxide, he was such a scientist that even when he was being carried out on the stretcher to fresh air, he was taking his own pulse and saying, yeah, it is feeble, but I think I will survive. So that kind of scientist. And so one day when he was fooling around as usual in the Pneumatic Institute, he inhaled a particular gas and he began to laugh. And he felt so heady. It was such a heady gas. He laughed and laughed. And then he would invite all his friends after hours when everybody had locked up and gone, come, let's have this gas and let's have fun. And that gas, of course, as we all know, was nitrous oxide. Sorry?
Nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide.
Yeah, and funnily, for so long, even after nitrous oxide was discovered, nobody just thought of using it as an anesthetic. People took it on shows in America. Nitrous oxide was discovered in London. At the same time, ether was discovered in America, which has the same kind of effect. So there were events called the ether frolics, where people would travel with a cylinder of ether and, they would demonstrate what happens, call up volunteers from the audience and have them, wander all about the stage, falling off in that state of drunkenness kind of thing. That was a big entertainment. Luckily, there were two dentists watching the ether frolics somewhere in America. And they noticed that the volunteer was actually bumping into things, cutting himself, but he never even stopped to say it's hurting. And then they said, hey, this looks like something we could use in the clinic to extract teeth, because even extracting teeth without anesthesia was a difficult thing. So they went and they tried it. The chief dentist, he tried it. It worked very well. But he never thought of reporting it. He just thought, okay, I have found a use for it. And he was using it. And then his partner said, come on, we need to go and show it to the world. So they went to the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. They took an appointment. They said, we will show you this ether works. And somehow it didn't work on that day. So the dentist gave up. Huh?
That's a failure.
It was a failure. It was a failure. Yeah. Then the other dentist, William Morton, he kept trying with it. And he said, I think it works. I really want to take another go at it. And this time they called chief medical superintendent of Harvard or something, because that's also near Boston or somewhere, right? So to remove some lump or something from somebody's neck, from a patient's neck. And he said, no, I've got it figured. This will work. So everybody came to the MGH. And because it was like a spectator sport, everybody come, watch, see what we're doing. Because you see, even then they hadn't figured out it was germs that caused medicine. So in Corona times, it seems so crazy. Even in pre-Corona times, it seems crazy that all these people used to crowd around while the surgery was being done, putting all their germs into that open wound. Okay. So anyway, he gave that person the anesthetic. This man was called William Morton, this dentist, and everybody gathered, waiting to say what nonsense. Because last time when it hadn't worked, somebody had stood up and said, this is all humbug, nonsense, and they had left the room. So this time it happened. It happened successfully. The patient did not cry out. He stayed sleeping throughout. When he woke up, they had stitched him up and they asked him, how did you feel? He said, I feel like some insect has bitten me. And then the doctor, the chief surgeon, he turned around and announced to the whole crowd that that gentleman is no humbug. And that is called Anesthesia Day. It was 1846, I forget the date. But that theater, that operation theater in the MGH is today called the Ether Dome. And it's still, the Ether Day and Ether Dome. And yeah, I'll just share my screen and show you a picture of that.
15th October is Ether Day, madam.
Okay. Thank you.
15th October.
15th October. Where is my slide? One sec. I'll come to it.
Ether dome.
So I wanted to show you, sorry. These are all I had wanted to speak. I didn't have time to hear. So you can see how that surgeon is doing the surgery. And he's fast asleep because ether is being fed to him through this, whatever, like thing. And I also wanted you to see the ether dome. This was how it was. So I just want you to think about how it used to be when they didn't know that germs cause disease. Surgeons used to operate in their same old scrubs. They would come, it would be full of blood and pus and whatever. They would hang it up and leave. And the next day they would come in their carriages, come straight into the OT, put on their dirty scrubs and begin to work. And he was a solo artist. There was no anesthetist because there was no anesthesia. So he would work by himself. And if he dropped his scalpel or something, he'd just pick it up and continue working. And there would be so many people watching him. And that's why, if you think about it, an operation theater is called an operation theater, because it was, people used to sit there and watch. That's why I wanted to show you how that thing was set up, which just seems so crazy. And leave you with one last story, if I may I? Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. If you're okay to wait for 5 more minutes, especially because of Corona, I wanted to say, now that we're all talking about washing hands, washing hands, washing hands, I want to tell you about a gynecologist, obstetrician called Ignaz Semmelweis. This was also in the 1800s. I will just look up my own book and tell you the date correctly. But he was working in Austria in the Vienna General Hospital. He was Hungarian. And there were 2 clinics in the Vienna General Hospital. And one was called the 2 maternity clinics. One was called first clinic, and the other one was called second clinic. First clinic was manned by fully trained doctors, surgeons who had gone through years of study. And the second clinic was manned by midwives. Okay. And they would beg people to come off the streets. There were a lot of people, prostitution, unwed mothers, teenage pregnancies, who didn't have a safe place to go or a family to be with when they had their babies. So these guys would go and beg them to come to their hospital. We will deliver your babies. And here's the bonus. We can even keep your babies after it. And you're free to go walk free after that, leave your babies behind. We'll take care of them for the rest of their lives. You can be free again. Plus it is free of charge. So please come in. And the reason for that was they wanted their doctors to get experience in delivering babies. So this was the best way. So people would walk into first clinic, second clinic. They would be put into whichever clinic was free at that time. But when Ignaz Semmelweis came and he was in charge of these 2 clinics, what he realized was that the maternal mortality rate, I mean, even having a child was a life-threatening exercise in those days. If you had it at home quietly, you might survive. But if you came into a hospital, because nobody was looking after taking care of germs, so you could die from. And what used to happen was they were getting a disease. The maternal mortality rate was like 10 to 15% or some ridiculous amount. Out of every 100 women who had babies, 15 would definitely die in childbirth. And the reason for death was a disease called puerperal fever, which they got after like 3-4 days after they had delivered. They would develop this fever and die. Now, what Ignaz Semmelweis noticed was that the second clinic, which was manned by midwives, had far fewer deaths from puerperal fever than first clinic. And this troubled him no end. He said, these are doctors, trained people, and they are losing more patients than the midwives. So there's something that the midwives are doing that we are not. And he went and studied what the midwives are doing. They were doing nothing different because he had trained them. So they were doing exactly as he had said. He just couldn't figure it out until one day his own colleague died of puerperal fever, a man. And everyone, how can a man die of puerperal fever? We thought this was a disease that came to women. And when they investigated further, they found that there was a wound on his arm that had become, infected, and he had died from that, and that was puerperal fever. So how did he get the wound? It was when he was doing a dissection on a corpse. He was in the mortuary. Somebody had died from puerperal fever. So to teach his students, he was also doing a dissection to teach them something about how the body looks, how the insides organs look after they've had puerperal fever. And during that dissection, one of his students' scalpels had been inside the body, had poked him, and he had got puerperal fever and died. Now, Semmelweis, something dropped, the penny dropped. He had no idea that germs cause disease, but he said there is something in that body that got transferred to the body of this doctor through the knife, and that is what has killed him. And then he had his moment of enlightenment. The midwives never worked in the mortuary. It was only doctors who worked in the mortuary. And he said, they're bringing something from the mortuary to the delivery room. That is what is causing these deaths. So he said, anyway, at the end of the day, you wash your hands with carbolic acid when you go home to take the smell off, only for the smell, to take the smell off. Why don't you do it every time you come from the mortuary to the delivery room? Wash your hands with carbolic acid before you attend to the patients here. And there was such a protest. People said, what? And because doctors were considered, we have noble hands, we have clean hands. What do you mean our hands are dirty? We are all high-class gentlemen, etc. But he said, no, this is the rule, you have to. And once he got them by that simple expedient of making both he said, midwives also wash, everybody wash your hands. And once, just by that, the maternal mortality rate dropped from 15% in months, in 4 months. It dropped from 15% or 17%. He had a particularly brutal month, 1 April. By August, it had dropped to 0. First time anywhere in Europe that the maternal mortality rate was 0, simply by what? He had no idea why it worked. He just knew it worked. And unfortunately for him, even after this breakthrough, when he wrote about it, the journals and all, they did not accept it. It took many more years before this became a thing, that everyone should wash their hands. And now even children know why it's important to wash our hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Roopa Pai, for such a lovely session. Thank you very much. Government of India has initiated an elder line toll-free number 14567. Elders or anyone on behalf of elders can call between morning 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for any questions, queries and support to elderly. Stay tuned to Hiriyara Vani for more such programs. Bye for now. Take care.